You're watching New Car Spin. This is the 2021 Honda Accord Hybrid. Yes, another hybrid. I just drove the Hyundai Sonata Hybrid, and I told you I was dying on the vine. I'm driving this hybrid, and it's different. And why is that, you'd ask? Well, first of all, Honda doesn't actually need a hybrid. They are the most fuel-efficient automaker in the United States. Their average is somewhere around 38.4 mpgs, and that's with all the pilots and the Ridgelines and everything else that they sell. So this is a pretty remarkable car. The Accord, of course, is a good car, but I'm talking about in general the way the hybrid aspect is. Hybrids can be built to do different things. For instance, I had a Volvo S60 T8, which was 400 horsepower, 415 to be exact. And it had a supercharged turbocharged engine for the front wheels and an electric motor for the rear wheels, and the combined power was like 415. So this hybrid is a lot different. It's different from the Sonata hybrid, and it's three different versions of hybrids that you can get. The Volvo was a plug-in. The Sonata had a solar roof. This just has a 2-liter inline-4 engine. And you'd think, oh, well, I mean, that's got to be powerful. But in reality, it's only producing 141 horsepower out of a 2-liter 4-cylinder. Now, the electric motor, interestingly on this car, is actually more powerful than the gas engine. So 181 horsepower for the electric motor. And there are batteries. It's not a plug-in. The motor charges the battery, which then powers the wheels. So it operates a lot like the Mitsubishi Outlander plug-in hybrid, but not exactly the same, because this is not a plug-in. I don't see a plug. Nope, no plug. You do see the radar and the parking sensors and the LED headlights. It's a good-looking car. But you'd think the combined horsepower would be 324 horsepower, and it isn't. Total output horsepower is 212. So let's get in and see what that means. Let me show you the back seat real quick. Or not. There we go. Oh. Now, compared to the Sonata hybrid, the air conditioning in here is not as good, but it is 96 degrees outside, so this is about as bad as it gets as for a test. So it's blowing cold, it's just not blowing me away. Unintended. So the engine cycles on and off to charge the batteries, and it can accelerate on its own in electric mode. And you have an EV setting here. You also have a sports setting. So the different drive modes are no different than what you would get in the Sonata. Sorry, the fans here were probably blowing on the microphone. Sorry about that. All right, so it's got a good Honda layout. It feels like an Accord. It drives very flat. It's very solid in here. And when I said the Sonata was a hybrid that made me feel like I'm dying on the vine, let's get into a very deep discussion here, because I have not Honda to blame for anything, but Tesla. So let me get my seatbelt on, and we'll have some sort of a review slash discussion about EVs. So we just put it in park. Cup holders here, of course. This Accord hybrid has wireless charging, USB ports in there, and a power outlet. And whoever had this car prior to me left their lens cap. So I have an extra charging outlet here. Automatic climate control, and it's hard to see in the daylight, but I do have heated and cooled seats. It's as hard to see in person as it is here on the camera. If you're back here, it's like, where are the buttons for the heated seats or the vented seats? Like, you cannot really make them out. It would have been better if they were, more logical like this, but they're hidden into that black display, and they're regular buttons. Okay. So driving the car, you just push down to put it in drive. There's no sport mode for the transmission. There's a sport mode though for the powertrain, let's just say. And what happens is I have a display here that changes the way it will show everything. And if I hit the home button, there we go. We can show Eco Drive, Power and Charge, that's what Eco Drive looks like. So I'm not really interested in this hybrid as an eco car, because it's really not a hybrid for fuel efficiency. Honda's already fuel efficient enough. I think this is more of a hybrid that kind of gets rid of a problem that Tesla has, as well as all the other EV manufacturers do, or at least they will in the next 15 to 20 years. So let's hit the road and I'll have a discussion with you about that. We also have auto brake hold. Nice and roomy in here. Sunroof, of course, unlike the Sonata hybrid. But it is blistering hot out there, so without further compliments to the weather, let's continue on. All right, so Honda doesn't need a hybrid, and that's because of their fuel efficiency on their entire fleet. However, squirrel. I always cringe a little bit when I go buy one. You never know when you're going to end up over a squirrel. So basically, 212 horsepower doesn't sound like a lot for this car, especially when a lot of manufacturers combine horsepower and they say, oh, the electric plus the gas engine equals a total output of plus one is 2. And what Honda did is they said, no, we're not giving you full output of everything at once. That's insane. And you got to remember, they created the Acura NSX, which is a hybrid, right? So that car got a warm reception, and now it's kind of getting a little bit more understood, and people are now saying, oh yes, we like the Acura NSX. Why didn't we like it in the beginning? So I'm not going to knock the Honda hybrid like I didn't like the Sonata hybrid from Hyundai. But what I will tell you is Tesla screwed everybody over. Tesla screwed it for you and I don't care what generation you're in. You're screwed. Because Tesla came to market with EVs, and everyone bought these EVs. And the problem is, manufacturers like Honda, Toyota, VW, Mercedes, BMW, the list goes on and on. Some of them are owned by other companies, right? But they've had to come up with a way to compete with Tesla to prevent Tesla from having all the market share on EVs. So while a manufacturer could have made more hydrogen cars, they had to make EVs instead to compete with Tesla. Now, Tesla, you got to remember, is where Elon Musk runs it and says fuel cells. You might as well call them fool cells. So the problem is, if Toyota or whoever didn't have to focus on making a car to compete with the market share Tesla was getting for EVs, you would have fuel cell vehicles, legitimate fuel cell vehicles on the market today. I'm in a school zone. Give me 1 second. Okay. You can see here how the power is working. The engine's powering the batteries. Sometimes the engine moves the front wheels, but the electric motor is also moving the front wheels. It works in tandem. Yes, it's only front wheel drive. The thing is, though, if a manufacturer has to take away time from hydrogen fuel cells to create a stupid EV car to compete with Tesla, what is the end result? The end result is mediocrity. And I'm not saying that this car is mediocre, but everyone's overlooking the big fact with cars that have battery for electric power, and that is waste. you can basically go look around at these cars, and you can do some research on battery recycling for EVs. And what people will say is, a typical EV car battery will last about 15 years. Okay, 1 second. Okay, I'm back. Had a call. So essentially, like, if you have a car with a battery that lasts only 15 years, what do you do with that battery pack? So you go online, you do some research like I did, and you realize, they don't actually recycle batteries. They reuse batteries. And what they do is they go, we don't have a real solution yet for these EV batteries. But they would be really cool if they were in your home, nailed to the wall, and used as like backup power source, like you would with the home generator. They're not as effective as they are in a vehicle over time, but that power is still usable. So basically, my biggest fear is you'd have more like nuclear waste sites with just tons and tons of car batteries. Instead, no, they want to turn your home into a nuclear waste site by throwing a bunch of batteries in your garage and then letting them sit there after they're 15 years old, which might be a fire hazard at this point, to store electricity that you may never use. Now, think about that. The solution to hybrid batteries or EV batteries is to stick them in your house to provide a use for a need you never had, which was, I might want to store electricity from the grid at hours when the electricity is at a cheaper rate. Well, why would the electricity rate ever fluctuate unless, of course, everyone was demanding electricity for their electric vehicle? And then in that case, of course, you would need all this crap in your car and in your house. And so we get back to Honda and Toyota, where they don't really put a big emphasis on these EVs like Volkswagen and Tesla have. And that's because if you look at the long-term aspect of it, is a manufacturer reliable for these EV batteries 20 years from now? Do you want 300 million battery cells in your backyard? No, nobody wants that. And of course, like when a regular gas engine vehicle goes kaput, you can smelt it. You can melt everything down and turn it into something else, right? You got contaminants, but you can get rid of those. But the batteries are the worst part. And so here we are in a hybrid, but this is not a plug-in hybrid, so it's not really pulling around a lot of battery power. It's not holding huge EV cells, and it's also running on gasoline, so you never have to plug it in. You don't have to worry about electricity rates. And if gas prices do go up, if that's your concern, it's not my concern because no one goes to work these days and people hardly commute because they're all working from home now. My point is, do you really need a hybrid? And the only saving grace to this Honda is that it's a touring model. So this is basically for their version of a luxury car for road trips. It's like a flagship car. So, you've got the wood grain, you've got some kind of leather, and a bunch of very good features in here that make it a nice car. But in the end, it makes sense if you want to go on a long road trip. If you need to go from Dallas to Houston, you can do that in this car. You can't really do that without charging your EV. And today, when it says 98 degrees, and we're having maybe a potential rolling blackout here, how are you going to go get a full charge in your EV before you head out of town? You can't guarantee yourself a full charge. Whereas you could easily get a full tank of gas when you have the time. It doesn't take long. The only problem with this car, though, is the CVT. So if I floor it, it's just one sound. Now, the electric motor is what's propelling the car, and then when you're cruising on the highway, the electric motor switches over to the gas engine, because the gas engine can just basically putt along at a low speed and charge the battery at the same time. So you're doing two things at once with that gas motor, which is why it's not as high horsepower as you'd expect it to be. So I don't know if you can, in 10 years from now, turbocharge this car, turn it into a hot rocket, or upgrade your battery and put in a 400 horsepower electric motor. I don't know what's going to happen with this car, but for today, here and now, it's a hybrid. I think it's unnecessary. It's a nice hybrid. Don't get me wrong, it's a nice hybrid. It's not the top 3 selling hybrids in the US, but it is a nice hybrid. If you needed a hybrid for some reason, and it's not for eco, because Honda also has the lowest CO2 output in their fleet without having to have a hybrid, you have to look at really hard what a hybrid can do for you versus their regular Accord Sport, for instance. They used to make, up until recently, an Accord like this with a manual transmission, but nobody bought it. And so my theory is, if nobody buys the hybrid, maybe they'll bring back the manual transmission. So I'm not quite dying on the vine in this car, but I would prefer a Sport with a manual transmission. And then we could avoid having to figure out where to put all our stupid batteries in 20 years. Put battery walls on LED light shops and hookah lounges. I don't think that's the future. But for people who think EVs are the future, they are 100% wrong. We have to wait until Honda and other manufacturers bring out the heavy weapons, meaning hydrogen fuel cell cars. No battery stuff. You have to get hydrogen in your car. It produces electricity. You can move on your way, and the only byproduct is water. That's the future. It's not EVs. Mark my words. I drove a hydrogen car back in 2006. I know what I'm talking about. All right. Thanks for watching. This is the Honda Accord Hybrid Touring. Nice vehicle. Quite on the highway, obviously. I don't really care for the CVT. That's the only knockback on this car. But fuel economy is unknown, really, because you're converting gas to electricity. That's a whole different discussion that I don't want to have. And you don't have to charge it at the house, because it's charging on its own. See, there's full battery there, and then there's fuel on the right side there. So your point here is you just get in and drive it. Beyond the CVT, the air conditioning is a little lackluster here in this Texas heat. It's now 99 degrees. It is blistering here today. Everything's going to struggle, but I feel like this car's struggling a little bit more than the Hyundai Sonata Hybrid. And the cool thing about the hybrids is that they use electric air conditioning compressors to cool the car. So the engine doesn't need to run to get the AC going. But for some reason in this car, when you're at a light, the engine shuts off. The AC does go into an eco mode, it feels like. And it didn't do that in the Sonata. And the reason why AC goes into an eco mode is because EVs go into an eco mode. They do that because your range is better when you don't use the HVAC system, which is why EVs are completely useless in Texas. Because could you imagine how much range you lose in a car in heat? Like, it says 100 degrees now. 100 degrees. Could you imagine how much range you'd lose in this car trying to keep the air conditioning going while you're at red lights, or in the Starbucks drive-through, or drive-through yoga, or whatever it is that you do in your EV? That is insane. That would use a lot of power. So I don't know if Honda's really got the game here for Texas heat or the acceleration because of their CVT. So I don't think it's really a Texas market kind of car. But for the general experience, a hybrid isn't a hybrid. They are all different because there's all different ways you can apply this technology, and it comes down to the platform. And the Sonata was an okay platform. The Accord's a much better platform. Let's see how it handles in this corner. Flat. And some squeal, obviously. And it's weird. Like, you hear an engine, but you don't You don't have a gear change because it's a CVT, and then you just have electric power, 181 horsepower. It's okay, but it's weird to have a car with more electric motor power than gas motor power. And that's the Accord Hybrid. Hopefully I didn't bore you too much. I wanted to give you kind of like the best explanation of this car possible. And I'd say if you're looking for an Accord, get an Accord. If you're looking for a hybrid, look at this over the Sonata. If you're going to get a Sonata, get the Sonata N-Line. And I don't know about the Honda Accord Sport versus the Sonata N-Line. Maybe we'll have to get an Accord Sport so I can figure that one out for you. Cool. Like, subscribe, send me several comments down below so that this video gets more exposure. For some reason, YouTube likes to not suggest many videos these days from people who aren't popular. So help them out and stay cool out there. Now it's 96. How funny. It just drops. All right. See ya.